Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Tell you what, we have officially hit June. And the thing about June is this. It is the slowest month on the college sports calendar, okay? Obviously, everything that happened in the previous school year is behind us. Football and basketball, both portals are closed. NBA draft deadline is gone. But we're also not quite yet at media days and really the start of football season. And so what we did last year in June, and I think we're going to go ahead and really ramp it up this year, is college hoops off-season grades. In other words, with the NBA draft deadline behind us, we know what rosters look like. And so we're going to spend the next 2-3 weeks breaking down all of the big programs, who they added, who they lost, what it means, and really what to expect from them this upcoming season. We'll hit again on all the big programs, UConn, Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Arkansas, whatever. By the way, if you want your team featured, you can always hit me up, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. But where we will start, we'll do our first offseason grades this evening. By the way, we won't do this 1-minute intro every single time. But we're going to go ahead and start off-season grades with the team that quite literally won the last college basketball game of last season. That is the Florida Gators. Okay, it wasn't always just the intention to do it because they're defending champs, but their offseason really kind of largely came to a conclusion here over the last couple days. Right before the draft deadline, they get good news. Right before the draft deadline, they pick up their biggest transfer of the offseason. And I'll say this, you start looking at Todd Golden's roster for 25-26, I absolutely believe it is a team that is good enough to go back-to-back as a national champion. Now we just got to see if it actually happens or not. Okay, so in terms of who Florida lost, transparently, it was mostly pretty much everybody that we basically thought they were going to lose the night that they beat Houston in San Antonio to win the national championship. Walter Clayton, out of eligibility, he's gone. He's awesome. He's going to the NBA. We're obviously recording this well before the NBA draft, but I'll tell you this. Walter Clayton's not a top 15 pick. I don't even know what we're doing in that league. Was so good in that NCAA tournament run, an all-time great tournament run. He's gone. Elijah Martin, who, of course, transferred in from Florida Atlantic. I don't think we probably give him enough credit for his story. Goes to Florida Atlantic, goes to a Final Four 2 years ago. They lose at the buzzer. Lamont Butler on San Diego State hits the game winner. Well, 2 years later, he gets back to college basketball's biggest stage, wins a national championship. He's gone. Will Richard is gone as well. So the three guards in the backcourt, all fifth-year seniors, gone. In terms of other losses, I'll be real. Sam Alexis left out of the front court. The only one that I think you could categorize as surprising, probably Denzel Aberdeen, right? And listen, this isn't a discourse. We're not going to spend too much time on Denzel Aberdeen because we'll get to him in the Kentucky offseason grade here in just a little bit. I know Florida fans, there's probably some of you watching that are probably still upset about that. My take is it's hard for me to get mad. This is the world that we live in. Denzel Aberdeen has a chance to make a crap ton of money. Frankly, maybe the most money he will ever make as a basketball player is next year at Kentucky. So it's hard for me to get all worked up because he ends up leaving. But he's gone. And that to me was really the only real surprise on a negative side for the Florida Gators. The good news is that for everything that they lost, most expected Denzel Aberdeen not, they also brought back an awful lot. Okay, so first of all, first piece of good news, Thomas Hawk, right as the NBA draft the deadline to enter, not the deadline to leave, but Thomas Hawk ends up withdrawing from the NBA draft here. But I take that back. Thomas Hawk never even entered the NBA draft, which was a huge early offseason win for Todd Golden. Great story in his own right, averaged 10 points per game, 6 rebounds, was the first big man off the bench, was really good as a starter, about 13 points per game in the 5 games that he started. Really interesting story. I actually, if I remember correctly, Gators fans, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was even a thought that early in the season, he might actually take a red shirt before some injuries. But I bring it up because he doesn't even test the NBA draft process where I think he could have conceivably gotten drafted. Also, as you saw on that screen, Micah Hanlogton is back. He was the starting center 2 years ago, has that awful injury in the SEC tournament. To his credit, he comes back. They were not expecting him to play at all this past season, but had the opportunity to come back, played relatively well down the stretch. We'll see what he looks like with a full offseason. Ruben Chinyelu, who quietly did actually test the NBA draft waters. He ends up withdrawing and coming back. He was really kind of the bulk and the physicality down low, although to the credit of the Florida front court, we'll talk about that in a minute. They were all more physical than they got credit for, but he was a really big, physical player, had that great game at Rupp Arena. And then lastly, for returnees, the big one. It came right before the NBA draft deadline. And it was huge. Alex Condon. Okay, so Alex Condon, fascinating story. And it's funny, I don't do a ton of NBA draft stuff, especially during the season. I look at college basketball through the college basketball lens. I'm not the dude that's, this guy's moving up in my mind. I don't care. I wish everybody luck. Hope everybody gets drafted. Hope everybody makes millions and millions of dollars. But when we're trying to break down teams during the season, I'm not going to freak out about, Alex Condon is moving up draft boards. But I bring it up to say he was moving up draft boards during the regular season. I think the back end of the year, there was a little bit of inconsistency that probably, I think, listen, just when the longer the season goes, the more tape NBA teams have on you. Sometimes stuff gets exposed. And so Alex Condon goes into the draft process. He does, by the way, go into the draft process as the leading returning scorer on this roster, 10.5 points per game, 7.5 rebounds. And it was funny because he does decide to withdraw. And I think Todd Golden was pretty transparent about it, was like, listen, this is the great part about NIL. If Alex Condon had stayed in the NBA draft, he probably actually would have been drafted, but he doesn't have to rush it. He doesn't have to rush that process. I think that's a great thing for across college basketball. We don't have to talk about Tahad Pettiford and Yaxel Lenenberg and LeBaron Philon and all those guys, but you just saw a lot of guys that were indecisive, not having to make tough decisions. Alex Condon's one of them. He is officially coming back to be a Gator. Now, though, as good as that front court is, there were spots to fill in the backcourt. And to Todd Golden's credit, he made some big moves. I think the first one, A.J. Brown, probably a little bit of an underrated addition. He was a player that played in the MAC last year, averaged 13 points per game, 39 or so percent three-point shooting. When he committed, I kind of said, okay, that's a very nice addition, a nice piece. But if that's your best piece, you're in trouble. I think he is going to play the role of kind of probably what Denzel Aberdeen was last year, fourth guard, maybe third guard and 3-guard lineups. By the way, we're not going to focus too much on the freshman class, but CJ Ingram, of course, the son of Cornelius Ingram, is a player that I think has NBA upside if it all clicks. But really, the offseason, as far as additions, outside of the guys that decided to come back, so yes, additions, I think it's really defined by two guys, right? First one is Xavier Lee. Comes from Princeton, 2-time All-Ivy League guy, 17 points per game, 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 37% three-point shooting. And it's been interesting listening to Todd Golden and listening to the coaching staff. I saw the lead assistant, Carlin Hartman, did an interview as well, where I think, and I'll include myself in this, I think everybody kind of sits there and say, okay, how do things translate from the Ivy Leagues from the Ivy League, to the SEC? And both coaches, Todd Golden and Carlin Hartman, said a couple things. One, Todd Golden was like, look, we ran all the advanced analytics, and I'm not an analytics guy. I don't have all the access to the things that Todd Golden does. But Todd Golden was like, dude, it all translates very nicely. The other thing, too, I just kind of trust Todd Golden, right? I mean, he's clearly a good evaluator of guys that can step up and be a contributor, be an X factor, in some cases, be a star at the high major level. And that was kind of the point that Carlin Hartman brought up, which was like, yeah, Walter Clayton came from the MAC. He came from Iona, turned out pretty well. Elijah Martin came from the AAC, turned out pretty well. Will Richard came from Belmont, turned out pretty well. So Xavier Lee comes in. I still think that, to me, he's more of a guy that plays off the ball, a contributor off the ball. And then the big one, and you got to give Todd Golden a ton of credit for getting this done. Boogie Fland officially withdrawing from the NBA draft and committing to Florida. Now, listen, it's interesting. I think this one was probably in the works a little bit longer than we expected, or maybe we realized. I saw Fran Fraschilla, of all people, and I love Fran, so this is not a criticism, but he put out some tweet about he was doing some event in New York that Todd Golden was at, and basically Todd Golden had to leave or came late because they were actually meeting with Boogie Fland's family in New York. So maybe this one was a little bit more kind of, behind the scenes stuff was going on maybe a little bit earlier than we anticipated. But I'll say this for Boogie Fland, man, and I've defended him quite a bit, is that I think he got kind of a raw. Listen, Arkansas fans get mad when I say it. I don't know that he got a quote unquote raw deal at Arkansas. What I will say is this, is that if you actually look at what he did on the court, and I do understand that Arkansas played its best basketball after he got hurt. But the bottom line is this was a dude that was averaging 15 points per game, was leading the SEC in assists when he got injured at over right around 6 per game. And on top of it, as you can see on the screen, was also leading the SEC at assist to turnover ratio. And so I'm not saying that Boogie Fland is a perfect player. What I am saying is he's probably a better player than we give him credit for. And I've said this consistently, is that I do love the fact that he was willing to come back and come off the bench in the NCAA tournament. I thought that was incredibly selfless. I think it's a move a lot of people wouldn't make. And so now he is a Florida Gator. He is the final piece. And I'll say this, can Florida go back-to-back? This isn't a hot take. Everybody who covers college basketball agrees with me. They absolutely can. Now, listen, to be clear, they're not a perfect team. As I said, Boogie Fland, the stats are there. He does have to prove, though, like to some degree that he is a winning player at the college level. I don't think that's a criticism. I just think that's the reality. And I think it's going to work out well under Todd Golden, because I just think Todd Golden really knows what he's doing. And I think Boogie Fland as a second-year player is going to be a lot better. Xavier Lee has to, be able to transition to the Power 4 level, to the SEC level, to the size and physicality. And I will say this too, I'm curious what they do at the 3 spot. Do they go with a smaller lineup, maybe A.J. Brown or C.J. Ingram at the 3? Do they go with Thomas Hawk and maybe a bigger lineup with Thomas Hawk at the 3, Condon or Chinye, probably Conlon at the 4, Condon at the 4, Chinyelu at the 5? So I don't know exactly what they're going to do at the 3. So they're not perfect. They have stuff to figure out. But I'll also tell you this, if it clicks, they have a chance to be really, really, really good, because to me, look, Boogie Fland, again, he is kind of the guy. He's the difference maker. You needed a guy like that. But like I said, in year 1 in the SEC, he was one of the best guards in the SEC when he played. Again, if you're an Arkansas fan watching, I understand the argument's going to be that we didn't win very much with him. Okay, I get it. And that's a different conversation we can discuss in the Arkansas preview when we do our Arkansas offseason grade. But the counter is that he's done it in the SEC. He's done it at the highest level. He's produced. Now he's just got to prove he can do it in the team setting. And I think that is something that will show in year 2 as just a dude that is more comfortable playing at this level. So I like Boogie Fland. I like the players that will play alongside him in the backcourt. I think Boogie Fland is the piece that brings it all together. And the other thing, too, with the front court is I remember talking about last year, Florida. I remember early in the season, it was kind of like, they have these kind of long athletic guys like a Thomas Hawk, like an Alex Condon, but they're also physical down low. And so last year, remember, they were one of the best rim protecting teams in college basketball. They were one of the best rebounding and one of the best offensive rebounding teams in college basketball. And the whole front court is back. So you think they'll be great, defensively. You think they'd be great on the boards. And again, it's just about the ability of the guards to kind of elevate their game and try to get somewhere kind of in the neighborhood where we last saw the Florida Gators with Walter Clayton and the guys that were there last year. So that's the Florida Gators. I will say this too. This is the other thing that has me really excited. We're going to find out darn quick just how good the Gators are, because it's funny. I was thinking about this too. Last year, remember, Florida was one of the last teams to be undefeated. They went into SEC play undefeated. But if you went and looked at their out-of-conference schedule, just wasn't very good. And it wasn't all their fault. They did play, Virginia in an MTE. They did play Florida State, of course, the in-state rival. They played Wake Forest. They played North Carolina in Charlotte, which was probably the most high-profile game. But even at that point, you kind of knew Carolina wasn't that good. And so I only bring it up because you didn't really know what to expect from the Gators going into SEC play. I'll say this, not only will we know a little bit about the Gators going into SEC play, we'll know a little bit about the Gators going into like mid-November, okay? Because the out-of-conference schedule is coming together. We're recording this in late May, early June. So if you're watching this in July or whatever, don't get mad if I miss some games. But you can see that already by the end of May, 2 very marquee games are on the schedule. Opening night, November 3rd, Tuesday, November 3rd is the opening night of college basketball. You know what? At least right now, the first big game on the schedule is Florida, Arizona in Las Vegas, T-Mobile Center. That is part of a doubleheader. AJ DeBonsa and the BYU Cougars will play Villanova in the late game. The early game is Florida, Arizona. And not to, overanalyze now here in May, I have Arizona and Florida both in my top 12 nationally. So I think that's going to be a matchup of top 15 teams. And then, oh, by the way, Florida, now you're going to New York City, Jimmy V Classic, to play UConn at Madison Square Garden. Listen, I think most people know I'm a UConn guy. I went to UConn, all of that. But I only bring it up because for Florida fans that aren't as familiar, the UConn campus is about a 2-hour drive from New York City. You can get on the train from Connecticut. It's a bordering state. UConn calls Madison Square Garden Store South. So you're walking into a snake pit there. But I give Todd Golden credit. I think, this past year winning this national championship, excuse me, it is clear that Florida is back to being a premier brand in all of college basketball, and they can schedule premier games. So we know they'll play Arizona on opening night. We know they'll play UConn at Madison Square Garden in early December. I'll say this, right before we got on air here, I saw an interview with Jay Lucas, the new Miami head coach, where he teased, hey, we're looking to renew an in-state rivalry. Well, they play Florida State in the ACC, and I don't think South Florida or Central Florida would count as an intriguing out-of-conference game for Miami. So there might be a Miami-Florida game on the schedule here as well, and we'll get more details as things go on. But that's the Florida Gators. This is off-season grades. So let me give them a grade. I'll go ahead and give them an A. I mean, listen, it's hard. What is the legitimate argument for giving them anything other than an A? Didn't bring back Denzel Aberdeen. I guess that's the only criticism you can have. But they got the right players at the right spots. I think bringing back Alex Condon when a lot of people, including Todd Golden, openly admitted they thought he was gone, I think it's huge. And listen, I think any year you're coming off of a national championship, in then a couple months later, you put together the following season's roster and you can win another one, I'm here to say it's hard not to give Florida an A. So that is our first College Hoops offseason grade. Make sure you're subscribed. As you can see, Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. We will be going ahead and doing as many as you guys want. If you guys keep watching them, we'll keep doing them. We're starting with Florida. Again, Louisville, UConn, Kentucky, Arkansas, Indiana, Arizona. We'll probably do St. John's, on and on. So make sure you're subscribed. We're not going anywhere. We'll still do normal shows, but this will kind of fill the gaps in an otherwise slow time of year.